How many times have you asked yourself, am I really living, or am I just existing? Wake up, work, meet obligations, sleep, and then repeat. Days that feel like carbon copies of each other, decisions you never really chose, and a quiet emptiness that just keeps growing inside. Maybe you feel like you're on autopilot, or like your life is just passing you by. And the scariest part, time doesn't stop. Every second you live is 1 second less. But hold on, this video isn't just about what you're missing. It's an invitation, a wake-up call, to think, and maybe to start a real transformation. Today, we're going on a journey through philosophy, with ideas from 20 great thinkers who can help you redefine your life, the life you actually deserve to live. So, shall we begin? How many times have you stopped to really ask yourself, who am I, really? Not your name, your job title, or the role you play in society, but who you are at the deepest levels of your own consciousness. This question, which sounds simple, is actually one of the greatest philosophical challenges of human existence. And it takes us straight to one of the most important teachings in history, the famous Know Yourself, attributed to Socrates and engraved at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy, never wrote a single book. Everything we know about him comes from the writings of his students, especially Plato. And yet, his influence still echoes through the centuries. Why? Because Socrates forced us to look inward. He taught that before trying to change the world, before chasing answers out there, we first need to face a deep and uncomfortable process of self-reflection. His method was built on one thing: questions. Socrates never handed out ready-made answers. Instead, by talking with people in the public squares of Athens, he would push them into intellectual discomfort. He asked questions that shook the very foundations of their beliefs. One classic example is his dialogue with Euthyphro, where Socrates challenges him on the definition of piety, breaking down every answer with more questions. The goal wasn't to humiliate, but to force reflection. He wanted people to realize their own ignorance. And here's your first big takeaway. Recognizing your ignorance is not a weakness. It's the first step toward true self-awareness. How many beliefs, ideas, and values do you carry today that you've never seriously questioned? Do you believe what you believe out of genuine conviction, or just because you were conditioned by your family, your society, your religion, or the culture you grew up in? Socrates' invitation is clear. Stop living on autopilot. As he said in his defense before the Athenian court, the unexamined life is not worth living. This isn't a moral condemnation. It's a wake-up call for transformation. Here's a simple exercise. Take a moment to reflect on these 3 fundamental areas of your life. 1. Beliefs. What do you really believe about the world, about people, and about yourself? Are these beliefs truly yours, or just ideas you inherited from others? 2. Values. What principles actually guide your daily choices? Honesty, freedom, loyalty, or are you just reacting to situations without knowing what you truly stand for? 3. Motivations. Why do you do what you do? What gets you out of bed every morning? Is it fear, the need for approval, or is there a deeper purpose driving you? Socratic self-analysis is not comfortable. It takes courage. Looking inward might reveal contradictions, inconsistencies, or even sides of yourself you'd rather ignore. But it's in this internal struggle that real transformation begins. Here's another key part of Socratic thinking: the constant search for ethical coherence. For Socrates, self-knowledge wasn't just an intellectual game. He believed we can only live justly, ethically and virtuously when we truly know ourselves. Not knowing yourself is often the root of your moral mistakes. Stop and think. How many wrong decisions have you made because you didn't fully understand your real motivations? How many conflicts in your life happened because you acted impulsively, without a clear sense of your own limits and desires? The Socratic method is a powerful tool to avoid these mistakes. It invites us to practice what today we'd call internal dialogue, to question ourselves, to doubt our own certainties, to look at a decision and ask, does this really make sense? Is it aligned with the kind of person I want to become? Another important point: Socratic philosophy is practical. It's not enough to reflect. You have to act on what you discover about yourself. Self-awareness without action turns into stagnation. Socrates reminds us that living philosophically means living with intention, purpose, and ethical mindfulness. If you've made it this far and are starting to feel uncomfortable, good. That's exactly the effect Socrates would want to have on you. Discomfort is the sign that you're beginning to break away from superficiality. And before we move on to the next lesson, here's a Socratic challenge for you. What is your greatest ignorance right now? What's inside you that you've never questioned or fully understood? Grab a notebook or even drop a comment on this video. Today I ask myself, and finish the sentence with the deepest question you can ask about yourself. Because in the end, Socrates' invitation is more relevant today than ever. Know yourself, and only then will you be able to change the world around you. Have you ever felt like life keeps throwing obstacles your way? Unfair, overwhelming challenges? Almost like the universe is conspiring against you. Maybe when you look back on your life, all you see are failures, losses, rejections, moments where everything seemed to fall apart. If you've been there, and let's be honest, we all have at some point, there's one philosopher who can offer you a completely different way to look at suffering: Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche isn't an easy thinker. He won't offer you comfort in the traditional sense. Don't expect promises of a pain-free or struggle-free life. On the contrary, Nietzsche invites you to look directly at everything that hurts and find there the raw material for your own transformation. One of his core ideas is, become who you are. But what does that actually mean? First, it means admitting that you're not yet fully who you could be. There's a latent potential inside you, a stronger, clearer, more authentic version of yourself, waiting to emerge. But that transformation doesn't happen in comfort. It's born in the exact moments when life pushes you to your limits. That's where Nietzsche's concept of amor fati comes in, a Latin phrase that means love your fate. Nietzsche invites us to something radical, not just to accept adversity, but to love it. Yes, even love the things you wish had never happened. Sounds crazy? Maybe. But pause and think. How many times have you grown because of pain? How many disappointments triggered necessary change in your life? How many failures made you get back up even stronger? Nietzsche writes in The Gay Science, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, but love it." This isn't resignation, it's not passive acceptance, it's an act of inner power. It's looking at your life with all its scars and saying, yes, it was hard, but I wouldn't be who I'm becoming if I hadn't gone through all of that. Another key Nietzsche concept is the will to power, Wille zur Macht, and it's really important to clear up a common misconception. Nietzsche isn't talking about political power, controlling others, or manipulation. For him, the will to power is a vital force. It's that inner drive that pushes you forward, that makes you create, transform, break limits, and face challenges. It's the energy that gets you out of bed when every part of you wants to quit. It's the ability to give meaning to your existence, even when the world feels meaningless. Nietzsche said, "Life is a constant struggle for affirmation." There's no ready-made manual to tell you how to live. There are no final answers. Only the ongoing opportunity to build yourself, day after day, and that journey inevitably involves self-overcoming, Selbstüberwindung, meaning your greatest enemy is yourself, not the economy, not your difficult boss, not your ex. Your biggest challenge is overcoming your own fears, your self-sabotage, your limiting beliefs. Nietzsche uses a powerful metaphor in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the 3 spiritual transformations. 1. The camel, where you carry the weight of the world, accepting burdens and obligations you didn't choose. 2. The lion, where you rebel, say no to what oppresses you, and break free from what holds you back. 3. The child, where you embrace creativity, say yes to life, and begin again with lightness and authenticity. So here's the big question. Which phase are you in right now? Carrying burdens, breaking old structures, or already creating a new way of living? Nietzsche doesn't promise an easy road, but he offers something far more valuable: the freedom to create your own path. He challenges each of us to stop seeing ourselves as victims and start acting as the author of our own story. So how do you put this into practice? Here are 3 steps inspired by Nietzsche's philosophy. 1. Reframe your pain. Take a difficult event in your life and write down what you learned from it. Ask yourself, how did this make me stronger? 2. Affirm your existence. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Ask, what can I do with what happened? 3. Create new values. Don't live by standards society imposed on you. Ask, what truly matters to me? Nietzsche believed we're the artists of our own lives. He talked about life as a work of art. Every choice you make, every obstacle you face, every small action, it's all part of the painting of your existence. And if today you feel stuck in a phase of pain, frustration, or fear, remember, Nietzsche would say this is exactly the moment when life is calling you to rise above yourself. In the end, life's too short to live afraid of suffering. As Nietzsche himself wrote, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger." So here's the final challenge. Instead of asking when life will stop testing you, ask yourself, how can I become stronger because of this? How can I become who I really am? So, are you ready to accept that challenge? Imagine for a moment that there's no pre-written script for your life, no set destiny, no divine plan detailing what you should do or who you should become. Now, imagine the weight, and at the same time the opportunity, that comes with that. That's the core of Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy, one of the biggest names in existentialism. Sartre looks us in the eye, metaphorically, and says, life has no pre-established meaning. You are free, and because of that, you are fully responsible for what you do with that freedom. Sounds liberating? It can be, but it's also deeply terrifying. Sartre called this condition condemned to be free. Yes, condemned. Why? Because there's no escaping it. Even not choosing is still a choice. Even standing still is still a form of action. One of Sartre's most famous quotes is, "Man is condemned to be free." You'll find this line in his famous work, Existentialism is a Humanism, where he lays out existentialism in a clear and accessible way. So, what does this mean in real life? It means there's no human essence that comes before existence. First, we exist. Then, we choose who we become. Unlike philosophies or religions that say we're born with a God-given or destiny-driven essence, Sartre says the opposite. Existence precedes essence. In other words, you weren't born with a ready-made purpose. There's no manual, no pre-written role. It's you, through your choices, who builds the meaning of your life. And here's the hard truth. If your life today feels far from what you want it to be, the responsibility is yours. That's one of Sartre's most uncomfortable ideas, because it's much easier to blame others, society, the government, your parents, bad luck, fate. But Sartre doesn't let us run from this. He makes us look in the mirror and recognize, I am what I've chosen to be, even when I thought I wasn't choosing anything. That doesn't mean we control everything. There are limits, material, historical, social. But even within those limits, there's always space for choice. Sartre lived in Nazi-occupied France during World War II. He knew firsthand what it meant to live under extreme conditions. Even then, he believed that, no matter the circumstances, we always have the freedom to choose our attitude toward life. This is where radical responsibility comes in. Sartre said that when we choose, we're not just choosing for ourselves. We're choosing for all of humanity. How so? Every choice you make, whether you realize it or not, sends a message. This is what I believe a human being should do, even if no one's watching, even if no one knows. Every action either reaffirms or denies values. Every decision is a statement. This is how I think a human being should act. That realization brings with it enormous responsibility, and that's why existentialism isn't a philosophy of excuses. It's a philosophy of action. Sartre said, "It's not what they did to you that matters, it's what you do with what they did to you." If you've been betrayed, fired, rejected, treated unfairly, you can't change the past, but you can choose your response. You can turn pain into learning, turn anger into motivation, turn fear into courage. So here's the inevitable question. What are you doing with your freedom? A lot of people, when they hear about existential freedom, imagine it as light, fun, carefree. But Sartre reminds us, freedom is a burden, because with it comes anxiety. Yes, existential anxiety. That empty feeling when you realize you're completely alone in your most important decisions. That no one can choose for you. That there are no guarantees. That every path comes with risk. But it's exactly within that anxiety that your biggest opportunity for growth lies. Because as Sartre says, life has no meaning a priori. It gets meaning through the choices we make. If today you feel lost, directionless, asking yourself what to do with your life, maybe it's time to face that freedom as an invitation to create a life project that's truly yours. Where to start? Here are 3 questions inspired by Sartre's existentialism that you can ask yourself right now. 1. What choices have I been avoiding out of fear of responsibility? How many times have you stayed stuck, waiting for a sign or a guarantee? When really, what's missing is simply a decision. 2. What stories am I telling myself to justify my inaction? Are you trapped in victim narratives, blaming everything and everyone else for what's happening? 3. What life project do I want to build starting today? Remember, there's no pre-made meaning waiting for you. Meaning is something you create with your actions, your projects, your daily choices. Existentialism isn't a philosophy of complaining. It's a philosophy of awakening. Sartre challenges us to stop being passive and start taking ownership of our existence. Yes, you'll make mistakes, you'll regret things, you'll change your mind, and that's okay, because it's exactly in the process of choosing, failing, starting over, and choosing again, that you build your own meaning. So now I ask you, if life is this blank space, what are you going to write in it starting today? If there's one universal truth in human life, it's this. Suffering is inevitable. No matter how much we try to avoid it, escape it, or numb it, pain is part of existence. But what do we do with this suffering? How do we face it without becoming cynical, bitter, or emotionally numb? This is where one of the most profound, and at the same time, one of the most misunderstood, philosophers in history comes in. Arthur Schopenhauer. Many people label him as just a pessimist, someone who saw the world through a dark and hopeless lens. But that's a shallow reading. If you dive deeper into his work, especially his most important book, The World as Will and Representation, you'll realize something much deeper. Schopenhauer wasn't a philosopher of despair. He was a philosopher of clarity. He invites us to look suffering straight in the eye, without illusions. For him, suffering isn't a flaw in life's design or some cosmic accident. It's the very essence of existence. Schopenhauer starts with a central idea. The world is driven by a blind, irrational force he calls will. This will is a constant impulse, an endless desire that shows up in everything. in nature, in animals, and most of all, in us as human beings. And what's the problem with that? The will is never satisfied. The moment you get what you want something else. You land a job, soon you want a better salary. You start a relationship, soon new insecurities and needs appear. You buy something new, it quickly loses its thrill. According to Schopenhauer, we're trapped in this endless cycle of wanting, and wanting more. And as long as we're stuck in this loop, suffering is inevitable. But there's a way to overcome it. And this is where many people are surprised when they study Schopenhauer more deeply. He points to compassion as one of the greatest forces for personal transformation. That's right, compassion, the ability to recognize someone else's suffering and to genuinely feel empathy for them. For Schopenhauer, compassion is the only true foundation for morality. He didn't believe in ethical systems based purely on logic, rules, or rewards in some afterlife. True morality, for him, is born from a direct and deep emotional connection with others. He wrote, "Compassion is the basis of all true morality. When you see someone in pain and you feel a real impulse to help ease that pain, you're breaking, even if just for a moment, from the natural egoism of the will. You're stepping outside yourself. You're breaking the me above all mindset. And in that moment, a real form of ethics begins to emerge." Schopenhauer acknowledges that suffering is built into life's structure. But exactly because of that, he invites us to become more compassionate. Because we're all in the same existential boat. We're all vulnerable to the same losses, frustrations, and pains. And that mindset has incredible transformative power. In a world where suffering is inevitable, compassion becomes an act of existential resistance. It's the gesture that breaks the cycle of selfishness. It's the look that says, "I'm vulnerable too. I could easily be in your place." So, how can you apply this in your daily life? First, start by changing the way you look at your own suffering. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "What can I learn from this pain?" That shift takes you out of victim mode and puts you in the mindset of someone seeking growth, even in adversity. Second, practice active empathy. That means looking around and noticing other people's suffering. Ask yourself, how can I help ease someone's pain today? Sometimes a simple gesture is enough. Really listening, offering a kind word, doing a small act of kindness. Third, remember that compassion also needs to extend to yourself. This isn't about self-indulgence. It's about recognizing your own humanity, welcoming your flaws, your failures, your limitations, is part of the process of healing and growth. Schopenhauer also points to another path for easing suffering: aesthetic contemplation. Art, music, literature, all have the power to temporarily suspend our endless will-driven desires. When you lose yourself in the beauty of a song or a sunset, for example, there's a brief relief from existential tension. It's a refuge, even if short-lived, from constant dissatisfaction. So, cherish those moments of contemplation. They're not an escape. They're moments of existential breathing space. But above all, never lose sight of Schopenhauer's central message. Recognize suffering as part of life and turn it into a source of empathy. If you're going through a tough time right now, take a deep breath and remember, you're not alone in this human condition. Everyone around you is fighting silent battles too. And sometimes, by helping someone else, you end up finding a little healing for yourself. Schopenhauer said, "Pain is essential to life, but it's through compassion that we find what's most noble in humanity." So here's my invitation to you. What if today you took one step beyond your own suffering and looked at the world around you with a little more kindness? How many times have you caught yourself getting stressed over things you simply can't control? Traffic jams, an unexpected argument, cancelled plans. missed opportunities, things that happen without your permission, that invade your day and often destroy your inner peace. Now, imagine living with the calm mindset of someone who, even as the Emperor of Rome, facing wars, betrayals, and even plagues, managed to stay emotionally balanced. That man existed. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and he's considered one of the greatest figures in Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wasn't a philosopher sitting comfortably in an ivory tower. He wrote his reflections at night, alone, as a way to organize his mind and cultivate virtue. These writings, later compiled into the book we now know as Meditations, are like an emotional survival manual. Even for our times, Stoicism, the philosophy that guided Marcus Aurelius, revolves around one central idea that can totally change the way you approach life. Separate what's within your control from what's not. Sounds simple, right? But in practice, it's a daily challenge. According to the Stoics, there are only two main categories in life. 1. What depends on us? Our opinions, our actions, our choices, our judgments, our emotional reactions. 2. What doesn't depend on us? Other people's opinions, external events, the past, the future, the weather, the economy, other people's behavior, and even, sometimes, our own health. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminds us, you have power over your mind, not external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. How many times have you wasted energy trying to change things that were completely out of your hands? How many sleepless nights? How many anxious moments? All because you were trying to control the uncontrollable. Stoicism doesn't teach you to be indifferent or to passively accept everything. It teaches you to focus your energy only on what you can actually change, and to accept with serenity the things you can't. Marcus Aurelius had enormous responsibilities. He ruled an empire. His decisions affected millions of people. And yet, in his writings, we see a man who constantly turned inward, striving to cultivate inner peace. He wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." That's powerful, because it reminds us that our experience of reality isn't determined just by what happens, but by how we choose to interpret and react to what happens. Let's bring this into your daily life. Someone was rude to you today. You can choose to carry that anger all day, or you can recognize that their behavior is outside your control and move on. A big plan fell apart. You can panic, or you can accept it, reassess, and ask, what can I do now within my control? Worried sick about the future, you can keep feeding your anxiety, or you can ask, what can I do today to handle this better, and what's completely out of my hands? This constant practice, separating what you can control from what you can't, is the heart of applied Stoicism. And there's more. Marcus Aurelius also teaches us about the impermanence of life. He reminds us that everything is temporary, problems, joys, even life itself. He writes, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one." In other words, stop theorizing, start acting. Serenity doesn't come from theory, it comes from practice. If today you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed, maybe it's time to start a simple Stoic ritual in your life. Here's a practical suggestion inspired by Meditations. Daily Stoic ritual. 1. In the morning, before your day starts, do a quick mental preview of possible obstacles. Ask yourself, what could go wrong today? How can I stay calm no matter what happens? 2. During the day, when a challenge comes up, pause and repeat to yourself, this is outside my control, but my reaction, that's mine to choose. 3. Before bed, reflect on your day. Ask yourself, where did I lose my patience unnecessarily? How can I handle it better tomorrow? This simple habit, practiced regularly, can completely change your emotional state. And there's one more thing Marcus Aurelius reminds us of. gratitude for life, even in its simplest and most imperfect form. He writes, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." Stoic serenity isn't emotional coldness. It's a mature way to face life with realism and courage, to accept that we don't control everything, but that we can always choose the best possible response to every situation. So now I ask you, what are the things you've been trying to control that are completely out of your hands? And more importantly, what would your life look like if, starting today, you focused only on what you can actually change? Who hasn't felt frozen when faced with a big life decision? Changing careers, ending a relationship, starting a new life project. These are moments when the future feels like a dense fog, where every step feels uncertain, and the fear of making the wrong choice screams inside us. If you've ever experienced something like that, and most of us have at some point, there's one philosopher who understood exactly what you're feeling. Søren Kierkegaard, considered the father of existentialism. Kierkegaard lived in 19th century Denmark, and his philosophy is a deep invitation to reflect on human existence. For him, life isn't a puzzle with ready-made solutions. It's a path that demands courage, responsibility, and most of all, authentic decisions. One of Kierkegaard's most powerful ideas is the concept of the leap of faith. But before we get to that, let's talk about a feeling that takes over during these moments of indecision: existential anxiety. Kierkegaard describes anxiety as that sensation of standing before endless possibilities, with no idea which one to choose. It's the weight of freedom. It's that sinking feeling in your stomach when facing the unknown. He says, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. And it makes sense, because the more freedom we have to choose, the more afraid we become of choosing wrong. For Kierkegaard, anxiety is a sign that you're facing a decision that really matters. It shows up when we realize the future is wide open. There are no guarantees, and it's up to us to decide which way to go. And this is where the leap of faith comes in. Contrary to what many people think, the leap of faith isn't some blind, irrational act. It's a conscious choice to move forward, even knowing there are no absolute certainties. Kierkegaard used this idea mainly in the context of religious faith, but really, it applies to every area of life. The leap of faith is, at its core, an existential leap. It's that moment when you decide to act, despite the doubt, despite the fear, despite the lack of guarantees. It's when you commit to a path, knowing you might fail, but choosing to walk it anyway. Life, according to Kierkegaard, doesn't offer certainties, and waiting for total security before making a move is an illusion. He writes, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Our meaning, the answers, the confirmations, the clarity on whether you made the right choice, only come later. First, you have to choose. And maybe this is Kierkegaard's biggest lesson. Life is a process of jumping in, committing, risking. If you're currently stuck in a phase of paralysis, where fear of making a mistake is keeping you from deciding, maybe it's time for your own leap of faith. There's no perfect moment. There's no risk-free path. What you do have is your freedom and your responsibility to choose. Kierkegaard also invites us to think about what he called the stages of existence. He described 3 main stages we move through in life. 1. The aesthetic stage, where people live chasing only pleasure, distractions, avoiding pain, and dodging any real responsibility. It's a superficial way of life, where everything is temporary and disposable. 2. The ethical stage, where you start taking responsibility for your choices. You realize life demands commitment, and that you can't keep postponing decisions forever. You start to treat your existence like a serious project that requires building. 3. The religious stage. This is the deepest level, where you accept the paradox of human existence and take the leap of faith, not necessarily by following an organized religion, but by embracing life with trust, even without rational guarantees. And here's a powerful reflection from Kierkegaard. If you don't choose, life will choose for you. Not deciding is already a decision. Constant postponing is, in practice, a kind of existential refusal. If you keep waiting for absolute certainty before acting, you'll probably stay stuck, collecting future regrets. That's why Kierkegaard challenges us to face anxiety head-on. Don't run from it. Understand it as a natural part of growing up. He writes, "Whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate." So how can you apply this to your everyday life? Here are 3 actions inspired by Kierkegaard's philosophy. 1. Accept uncertainty. Understand that no major step in life comes with guarantees. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to act even while afraid. 2. Take responsibility for your choices. Stop blaming others. Be the author of your story. Remember, not choosing is still a choice. 3. Find meaning. Through commitment, the leap of faith isn't just a one-time act. It's a continuous commitment to the path you chose. Whether it's a relationship, a career, or a personal project, dedicate yourself fully. So, what decision have you been putting off because you're scared of not having guarantees? Maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to take that leap. How many times have you felt like you're living a life that isn't really yours? Like behind your daily routines and behaviors, there's a part of you that's still unexplored, hidden, just waiting to be recognized. If you've ever felt this way, then you're ready to dive into one of the most transformative concepts in analytical psychology, the individuation process, developed by Carl Gustav Jung. Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, offers us a deep yet incredibly practical way of understanding personal identity and growth. While many philosophies talk about finding yourself, Jung goes further. For him, truly finding yourself means integrating all the different parts of who you are, even the ones you'd rather ignore. So, what exactly is the individuation process? For Jung, individuation means becoming a whole human being. It's a path of deep self-knowledge where you recognize and integrate the many aspects of your psyche: the light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious, the social self and the authentic self. And this leads us to 3 key concepts: persona, shadow, and self. Let's start with the persona. The persona is the social mask you wear every day. It's the role you play to fit into the world, whether it's as a professional, a friend, a son or daughter, or any identity you adopt to be accepted. The persona is necessary. Without it, functioning in society would be almost impossible. But the problem begins when you start confusing the mask with your true self. When you believe you are only what you show to others and forget to look inward. How many times have you felt like you were just performing? Just playing a role to please people, to be accepted, or to avoid conflict? Now, let's talk about the shadow. The shadow is everything you reject in yourself. It's the repressed desires, the denied emotions, the impulses you've been trained to hide since childhood. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, until you acknowledge your shadow, it will keep influencing your behavior without you even realizing it. Think about that impulsive reaction you regret later, or that intense judgment you pass on others, which often reveals something you haven't accepted in yourself. That's your shadow showing up. Facing your shadow is painful, but necessary. It means recognizing that inside you there's anger, jealousy, pride, but also hidden strengths and qualities you've been too scared to express. And here comes one of the biggest challenges of individuation: integrating your shadow without being controlled by it. It's about looking at your darkest sides, understanding them, accepting them, and turning them into self-awareness. Now, what is the self? For Jung, the self is the central core of your psyche. It's your true self. It's the totality of who you are, both conscious and unconscious. It's that internal point of balance you can only reach after facing both your persona and your shadow. Individuation, at its core, is about becoming who you really are, not what others expect from you, not what society says is ideal, but who you become when all your parts come together in harmony. So, how do you actually begin this process in real life? First, you need the courage to look within. Jung said the journey into yourself is the hardest journey there is. It takes brutal honesty, a willingness to face painful memories, and an openness to the unknown. Here are 3 steps inspired by Jungian psychology to help you start. 1. Examine your persona. Ask yourself, how many masks am I wearing every day? Am I living authentically, or just playing roles to please others? 2. Face your shadow. Reflect on this. What behaviors in others trigger me the most? What do I criticize most in others that could actually be something I deny in myself? Start recognizing these parts, without judgment, just with the intention to understand. 3. Connect with yourself. Make time for silence, introspection, meditation, or reflective journaling. Pay attention to your dreams, symbols, and the images that come to your mind. Jung believed the unconscious communicates through symbols and archetypes. Speaking of archetypes, they're another essential key in the individuation process. Archetypes are universal images that live in the collective unconscious. They're patterns of behavior and meaning we all carry, no matter our culture or time period. Examples of archetypes: the hero, the sage, the caregiver, the rebel. Throughout life, we're called to embody different archetypes, and recognizing which ones are active in your life right now can help you understand where you are on your personal journey. So, stop and ask yourself, which archetype is most present in my life right now? Am I living as the hero, the caregiver, the sage, or maybe the explorer? This awareness helps you see where you are and where you can grow. The individuation process doesn't have a final destination. It's a lifelong path of integration, growth, and reconnection with yourself. And as challenging as it may be, it offers one of the greatest gifts of human existence: the chance to live a truer, more conscious, and more meaningful life. As Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." So here's my invitation. If today you feel disconnected from yourself, maybe it's time to start your own individuation journey. Ask yourself, what parts of me have I not yet recognized and need to integrate so I can finally become whole? 8. Confucius, transformation through cultivating everyday virtues. In a world obsessed with quick results, instant makeovers, and magical solutions to life's problems, the philosophy of Confucius comes as a much-needed reminder. True change happens gradually, through small daily actions and the consistent practice of virtues. You don't need to move to another country, drop everything, or reinvent yourself in some dramatic way to transform your life. Sometimes, all you really need is to start acting with more kindness, justice, and self-control. Day after day. Confucius lived over 2,500 years ago in China, during a time of political and moral instability. He wasn't a philosopher lost in abstract theories. His ideas came from careful observation of real life, human relationships, and everyday social interaction. For Confucius, the big question was, how can we live together more harmoniously? How can each of us become a better person? His answer was direct but challenging, through the cultivation of virtues. One of the central ideas in Confucian thought is the practice of Ren, which can be translated as humanity, benevolence, or compassion. For Confucius, being human was about more than just having a biological identity. It was a daily choice to act with empathy, to see others as equally deserving of dignity and respect. He said, "Do not do to others what you would not want done to yourself." A simple but deeply ethical rule, that calls us to practice care and respect in even the most basic interactions, with family, friends, co-workers, and even strangers. Here's something worth reflecting on. How many times, in the heat of the moment, have you spoken harshly to someone? How often have you failed to really listen to what someone was trying to express? Practicing humanity isn't about big heroic gestures. It's about small, consistent actions that, when added up, shape a nobler character. But Confucius doesn't stop there. For him, beyond humanity, we must also cultivate yi, or justice. And justice, in Confucian terms, isn't just about laws or courtrooms. It's an inner sense of ethics, born from the ability to do what's right, even when no one's watching. It's about having integrity in your small daily choices. When you return extra change after a transaction. When you choose honesty in a situation where it would be easy to look the other way. You're living out the kind of justice Confucius taught. He believed that a moral person doesn't act out of fear of punishment or expectation of reward. They act justly because it's the only path for someone who wants to live with true character. He reminds us, the superior person is modest in speech but exceeds in actions. In other words, what matters isn't the nice things you say about yourself. It's what you actually do, every single day. So, how do you maintain this ethical mindset in the face of daily challenges? That's where Confucius introduces the third essential virtue, li, often translated as self-control, discipline, and respect for proper conduct. Li is what helps us stay grounded when we're tempted to react impulsively. It's about self-mastery. It's the ability to take a deep breath before reacting out of anger. It's the emotional discipline to choose the best path, not the easiest one. Confucius taught that discipline doesn't just show up in the big moments of life. It reveals itself in the small daily rituals. How you greet people, how you handle setbacks, how you organize your day. All these moments reflect your level of self-control. He said, "Demand much from yourself and little from others. That's true discipline." In other words, stop waiting for the world to change to please you. Change yourself first. Confucius' philosophy is, above all, a philosophy of practical action. It's not enough to just think about ethics, study it, or talk about it. Real transformation only happens when you bring these teachings into your daily behaviors. As he said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying small stones." If today you feel far from being the person you want to be, if you struggle with balance, patience, or compassion, know that the path to change can start right now. You don't need a huge life overhaul. Just start by paying more attention to how you treat the people around you, how you handle everyday frustrations, how you respond to small injustices, whether you witness them or commit them. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about Confucius's philosophy is this: it's never too late to start cultivating virtues. Every day is an opportunity to become a better version of yourself. The life transformation you're looking for might begin with something simple: listening more, judging less, acting with fairness, staying disciplined, offering kindness. Here's a Confucian reflection for you to hold on to. The man who makes a mistake and doesn't correct it is making another mistake. That means recognizing your flaws is an act of wisdom. Deciding to change is an act of courage. So today, here's my invitation to you. Which virtue will you start cultivating first? Humanity, justice, self-control. Pick one and start. The life transformation you're seeking just might begin right now. Who hasn't, at some point during a moment of silence or personal crisis, asked, "What's the point of all this? Waking up, going to work, paying bills, dealing with problems, facing loss, and then repeating it all again the next day." That feeling of repetition, lack of purpose, and existential emptiness is more common than we like to admit. And it was exactly that feeling that inspired Algerian philosopher and writer Albert Camus to develop one of the most provocative ideas in modern philosophy, the concept of the absurd. For Camus, the great conflict of human existence comes from an unavoidable clash our deep desire to find meaning in life, and the silent indifference of the universe. Camus didn't deny the beauty of life. Far from it. He loved nature, art, and the simple human experiences. But when he looked honestly at the human condition, he saw something undeniable. The world offers no guaranteed meaning. There's no universal purpose written in the stars. Life simply is. No final explanations. No cosmic promises of justice. In his most famous work, The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus presents the image of the Greek mythological figure condemned to push a huge boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down and repeat the process for all eternity. For Camus, Sisyphus represents all of us. We live in cycles of effort and frustration. We search for meaning in a world that remains silent in the face of our deepest questions. And what's the easy answer to this dilemma? To give up. Camus actually begins his work by asking if suicide might be the only logical response to the absurd. But his conclusion is powerful and life-changing. Suicide is not the solution. The answer is rebellion. Yes, a creative, existential rebellion. A conscious decision to keep living, even knowing that the universe doesn't cater to our desire for meaning. To keep going, not out of obligation, but by choice. Camus writes, "What is a rebel? A man who says no. No to despair. No to cynical resignation. No to existential surrender. But also, yes to life as it really is, with its imperfections, its emptiness, its contradictions." For Camus, living is a poetic act of rebellion. It's choosing, every day, to give meaning to your actions, even knowing that, in the grand scheme of things, the universe won't hand you any pre-packaged answers. So how do you do that in real life? First, you need to accept the absurd. Don't deny it. Don't run from it. Don't cling to easy answers or comforting illusions. Accepting the absurd means looking reality in the eye and saying, "I know life is limited. I know suffering is part of the deal. I know everything can end at any moment. And even so, I choose to live." That's the first step in existential rebellion. The second step is to create your own meaning. Camus believed that life gains meaning through the choices we make, the projects we commit to, the love we nurture, the work we create. He said, "Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present." In other words, meaning is found in the now, in what you do with the time you have, in how you love, work, create, fight, and shape the world around you, even if that world remains indifferent. Camus wasn't just a philosopher. He was a journalist, a writer, a political activist. He lived intensely. He fought against injustice, defended human rights, and wrote novels, essays, and plays, all while staying fully aware of the absurd. If you're feeling stuck in a phase of existential emptiness right now, maybe Camus's philosophy can help shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "What's the meaning of life?" try asking, "What meaning can I create today with the choices that are within my reach?" That change in focus can be transformative. And more than that, Camus reminds us that simply living well, with ethics and beauty, is already a form of resistance. It's like looking up at an indifferent sky and smiling anyway. It's like embracing someone, knowing that time is limited, and that makes the hug even more precious. He wrote, "In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer." That might be one of the most inspiring lines in all of existentialist philosophy. It reminds us that even in the hardest moments, we can find within ourselves a core of resilience, creativity, and life. Living in the face of the absurd isn't easy. It takes emotional courage. It demands philosophical maturity. But more than anything, it's a conscious choice not to waste the short time we have in this world. Camus doesn't invite us to conform. He invites us to act, to turn each day into an affirmation of freedom, to make our life a work of art, an imperfect work, yes, but a deeply authentic one. So here's the real question. What will your act of creative rebellion be today? What can you do right now to bring a little more meaning into your own existence? How many times have you stopped to ask yourself, is the life I'm living really mine? How many of your choices have been truly authentic? And how many were just repetitions of norms, expectations, and social rules imposed on you? If this question has ever bothered you, it's time to dive into the work of one of the most provocative philosophers of the 20th century, Michel Foucault. Foucault wasn't the kind of philosopher who gave ready-made answers. Quite the opposite. His mission was to question, deconstruct, and challenge everything we often accept as absolute truth, without ever stopping to ask where these truths even came from. In works like Discipline and Punish, The History of Sexuality, and The Order of Things, Foucault explored how social norms, language, and power systems shape the way we think, feel, and act. For him, most of what we consider natural or normal is actually the result of historical, cultural, and political constructions. And here's Foucault's central challenge to all of us. If all of this was constructed, it can also be deconstructed. And even more, it can be consciously rebuilt. This is where the idea of self-creation comes in. Foucault invites us to see life not as something that just happens to us, but as a work of art we can actively create. But what does it actually mean to make your life a work of art? First, it means recognizing that you have both the power and the responsibility to question the norms that have shaped you up to this point. The rules about how you're supposed to live, how you're supposed to behave, what you're supposed to desire, what success should look like. All of this can and should be examined. Foucault said, "Freedom is not a state, but a practice." In other words, being free isn't something you achieve once and then you're done. It's a daily exercise, a constant habit of asking yourself, is this choice really mine? Or am I just repeating what I was taught? How many decisions in your life have you made just to please others? How many times have you held back out of fear of disappointing people's expectations? How many dreams have you buried because you thought they weren't appropriate or realistic? Foucault invites us to flip that mental switch, to realize that ethics isn't about following some fixed rulebook, but about creating a conscious, responsible relationship with your own freedom. And here comes another key concept in Foucault's philosophy: ethics as the aesthetics of existence. For him, an ethical life isn't about just obeying rules. It's about crafting a lifestyle that reflects who you truly are. It's about looking at your life the same way an artist looks at a blank canvas, with creative freedom, boldness, and authenticity. He wrote, "Why not make life itself a work of art?" That's almost a poetic invitation for you to take full ownership of your own story. But Foucault also reminds us, freedom always comes with responsibility. Living ethically means understanding that your choices have consequences, not just for you, but for the people around you. True self-creation isn't an act of selfishness or empty rebellion. It's a commitment to building a life with meaning, consistency, and integrity. So, how can you start putting this into practice? Here are 3 Foucault-inspired challenges. First, question the narratives that shape you. Ask yourself, where did my ideas about success, happiness, sexuality, gender, body image, and work come from? Which of these beliefs are really mine, and which ones did I inherit without even realizing it? Second, observe your daily habits. A lack of authenticity often shows up in the small, automatic routines. How do you take care of yourself? How do you eat? How do you manage your time? How do you treat others? Reflect. Am I living consciously or just going through the motions? Third, create a life project that's truly yours. Foucault talked a lot about the importance of self-formation. This means setting practices that help you build the kind of person you want to become. It could be through writing, art, exercise, meditation, or study. What matters is that you have a regular practice of reflection and action. And remember, self-creation is a lifelong process. There's no final destination. Living ethically, for Foucault, means staying in motion, always reinventing yourself, always staying aware of how power, norms, and social narratives try to box you in. So today, I invite you to look at your life with an artist's eye. Ask yourself, if my life were a work of art, would it really reflect who I am? What colors, forms, and rhythms would I want to add, starting now? Foucault's philosophy is a call for existential courage, an invitation to take authorship over your own existence, even if that means swimming against the current, challenging expectations, or breaking old patterns. Are you living as a spectator of your own story, or as the artist of your own life? What does it really mean to live a happy life? Is happiness just about feeling pleasure, having fun moments, accumulating wealth, status, or social recognition? For Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers in history, true happiness goes way beyond temporary moments of joy. He invites us to see happiness as a life project, a continuous process built on ethical choices and aligned with our best possible selves. The term Aristotle uses for this kind of happiness is eudaimonia. What? More than just a passing emotion, eudaimonia is a state of full human flourishing. It's living in a way that fulfills the best of who you are. In his book, Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle offers a deep reflection on what leads a person to live a good life. For him, the answer is clear: living virtuously. But what does that mean in practice? First, Aristotle reminds us that happiness isn't a matter of luck. It's not like winning some cosmic lottery. It's the result of conscious choices, built through daily habits over time. He writes, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. In other words, it's not enough to want to be a good person in theory. You have to practice virtues every day until they naturally become part of who you are. So, what are these virtues? Aristotle lists several, but some really stand out when it comes to everyday life: courage, generosity, justice, temperance, prudence, and honesty. For every life situation, there's a corresponding virtue. For example, when facing fear, the virtue is courage. When dealing with desires, the virtue is temperance, meaning balance and self-control. In how we treat others, the virtue is justice, leading us to act with fairness and respect. But Aristotle also warns us, virtue always lies in the middle. He calls this the golden mean. That means virtue exists in the balance between two extremes. For example, courage isn't about having zero fear, that would be recklessness, and it's not about being ruled by fear, which would be cowardice. True courage is the balanced ability to act rightly in the face of danger, fully aware of the risks, but without freezing up. This idea of balance is one of Aristotle's greatest contributions to ethics. He teaches that extremes often bring suffering and chaos. True happiness comes when we act with moderation, wisdom, and emotional balance. Another key concept in Aristotle's philosophy is telos, or purpose. For him, everything in nature has a purpose. A seed's purpose is to become a tree. An eye's purpose is to see. And the human purpose is to fully realize our rational and ethical nature. That means being happy is about living in alignment with our deepest human essence, our capacity to think, choose, and act with virtue. So here's an important question. Are you living in alignment with your values? Or are you just going through the motions, making automatic decisions without thinking about their impact? Aristotle reminds us, happiness doesn't happen overnight. It's built, brick by brick, in your daily decisions. Every time you choose generosity over selfishness, every time you practice patience instead of irritation, every time you choose to be fair, even when it would be easier to ignore, you're building your eudaimonia. And one more thing, for Aristotle, a happy life isn't a lonely one. Eudaimonia is deeply social. He believed that humans are political animals, meaning we can only truly flourish within a community. Virtues come to life in human relationships, in friendship, in social justice, in caring for others. So pursuing happiness also means taking ethical responsibility for the people around you. You can't be truly happy while ignoring other people's suffering or living selfishly. Aristotle also highlights the importance of phronesis, or practical wisdom. That's what helps us figure out, in each specific situation, what the most virtuous action is. There are no one-size-fits-all answers. Being ethical is an ongoing exercise in reflection and adaptation. It's about staying aware of your context, the consequences of your actions, and your own limitations. So how can you bring all of this into your daily life? Here are a few Aristotelian-inspired questions you can start asking yourself right now. 1. Are my daily actions aligned with the virtues I admire? If the answer is no, what small things can you start changing today? 2. Am I building habits that move me closer to my best self? Remember, excellence is built through repetition. Small, virtuous actions done every day create a strong character. 3. Am I seeking balance and avoiding extremes? Being flexible, aiming for the middle ground, and acting with emotional balance are all signs of ethical maturity. 4. Are my choices contributing to the greater good? Personal happiness and the common good are connected. Aristotle reminds us, true life success isn't material, it's existential. He writes, happiness depends on ourselves, not on external circumstances, not on luck, and not on things we can't control. It depends on how we choose to live, day after day. So if you're looking for a more fulfilled, more authentic, and more meaningful life, maybe it's time to embrace eudaimonia as your guiding life project. Ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to become? And what concrete choices can I make today to start that transformation? How many times have you felt like the ground suddenly disappeared beneath your feet? Like everything that seemed stable suddenly became uncertain. Relationships ending without explanation. Jobs disappearing overnight. Identities shifting from one moment to the next. If you feel like you're living in a world slipping through your fingers, you're not alone. And to understand this kind of volatile reality, there's hardly a more relevant thinker than Zygmunt Bauman, the Polish sociologist, best known for his concept of liquid modernity. Bauman describes our time as an era of liquidity, but what does that actually mean in everyday life? In Bauman's metaphor, liquid modernity is a historical and social period where nothing stays solid, fixed, or permanent anymore. Everything flows, everything changes, everything transforms, and at an alarming speed. Human relationships have become more fragile. Work is no longer a safe harbor. Identities, which once felt stable, are now multiple and constantly shifting. Bauman writes, in liquid modernity, the only certainty is uncertainty. And that comes with a huge emotional cost. We live in constant anxiety, afraid of losing what we have, yet often unsatisfied with what we've achieved. We feel like we constantly need to adapt, update ourselves, and reinvent who we are, as if at any moment we could be replaced. In our love lives, this shows up as what Bauman calls the fragility of bonds. He describes how emotional connections have become more disposable. He talks about liquid love, where fear of commitment and the hunt for fast experiences replace the building of deep, lasting relationships. How many times have you seen or lived relationships that started out intense and ended with no real explanation? How many important conversations were replaced by unanswered texts? How many connections were cut off just to avoid the discomfort of a tough conversation? Bauman's analysis isn't here to make you feel guilty. Quite the opposite. He wants you to understand that you're a product of a social context that encourages this kind of liquidity, but recognizing this is the first step to changing how you live. So, how do you do that? First, you have to accept that change is a permanent reality. There's no use fighting the flow of life by holding onto things with unnecessary force. But that doesn't mean you should live a shallow, rootless life either. The key is to develop a new skill, the art of continuously redefining yourself without losing your core essence. Bauman invites us to develop what we might call conscious flexibility. It means understanding that the world changes, circumstances shift. But even so, it's possible to build a solid identity, not by being rigid, but by being reflective, adaptable, and authentic. Which brings us to a critical question: who am I, beyond the social roles I play? If your job changes, do you still know who you are? If a relationship ends, do you still recognize yourself? If the world around you flips upside down, do you have an internal core of values that holds you steady? Bauman's proposal is simple but powerful. Instead of looking for external security in things that are naturally unstable, start building internal security, rooted in self-knowledge, personal ethics, and a sense of purpose. Another key point in Bauman's philosophy is the need to build more meaningful connections. He wasn't advocating loneliness or superficial living. On the contrary, he warned us about the risks of living through quick, disposable relationships. According to him, real emotional security doesn't come from the quantity of connections, but from the quality of the bonds you nurture. True friendships, relationships built with dialogue and patience, family ties based on genuine affection. These matter far more than likes, followers, or casual contacts. In a liquid world, building solid bonds is almost a revolutionary act. But Bauman was also realistic. He knew we can't control the pace of external changes, but we can choose how we respond to them. So here's a challenge inspired by his thinking. Are you just drifting along with the current of liquid modernity? Or are you learning to swim consciously in this new reality? The choice is yours. Here are some practical steps you can start taking. 1. Nurture real connections. Invest time in people who truly matter. Have real conversations. Be present. 2. Practice self-knowledge. Reflect on your values. Understand what drives you. Build an identity that isn't based only on external factors. 3. Accept change, but without sacrificing depth. Change is part of life, but that doesn't mean living shallowly. You can stay flexible without becoming fickle. 4. Pause before you consume, whether it's people, content, or experiences. This liquid way of living also affects how we consume everything. Before jumping on a new trend or bandwagon, ask yourself, does this actually make sense for me? Or am I just going with the flow? Bauman reminds us that despite all the fluidity of modern life, the power to choose is still ours. We can choose to live with more presence, more depth, and more authenticity. He writes, "In a world of rapid change, the challenge is to learn how to live with uncertainty, without losing your sense of purpose. So ask yourself, in the middle of all these changes, what kind of person am I becoming?" How many stories do you tell yourself every day? Stories like, "I'm this way because I had a tough childhood. I've never been good at relationships. People always told me I wasn't capable." These narratives, no matter how small they seem, shape how you see yourself, how you act, and even how you envision your future. This is where one of the most thought-provoking and challenging philosophers of the 20th century comes in. Jacques Derrida, the father of deconstruction. Derrida wasn't the kind of philosopher who gave easy answers. Quite the opposite. He was the master of uncomfortable questions, the one who took ideas people thought were solid and broke them apart, piece by piece, to show that what we call truth is often just a linguistic, cultural, or historical construction. But what does that have to do with your life? Everything. Derrida teaches us that it's not just big philosophical concepts that should be deconstructed. The personal stories we tell ourselves deserve the same treatment. Why? Because a lot of these stories are limiting, rigid, built on old interpretations, labels others put on us, or beliefs that no longer make sense. Derrida said meanings are never fixed. They're always shifting. They're like open texts, meant to be reread, reinterpreted, and rewritten. So here's a direct question for you. What story are you telling yourself that might be long overdue for deconstruction? Maybe it's the story that you're an anxious person, or the belief that you always fail when you try something new, or that old idea that you're not worthy of love, success, or happiness. Derrida invites us to look at these internal narratives with a critical eye, not to deny the facts of your life, but to realize that how you interpret them is just one of many possible readings. For example, if you've had a series of professional setbacks, you could frame that story as, "I'm a failure." Or you could deconstruct that and reframe it as, "I'm someone who's gained valuable lessons and who's now better prepared for what's next." See the difference? The facts didn't change, but the meaning did. Derrida points out that every text, every narrative, has multiple layers of meaning. What you see on the surface is just one version. There are always other possible interpretations, other ways to read your own life story. And why is that so liberating? Because it gives you the power to rewrite your story, to step out of the victim role and into the role of the author of your own narrative. But here's something important. Deconstruction isn't about destroying. It's about carefully analyzing, almost like a craftsman taking apart a piece to understand how it works, so it can be rebuilt in a new way. So, how do you start this personal deconstruction process? First, identify the core narratives you've been repeating to yourself. Ask, what phrases about myself do I say over and over? Where did these ideas come from? Do they still make sense? Or are they just echoes of old voices still stuck in my mind? Second, realize that every narrative has gaps. Derrida draws attention to what's left unsaid, what's omitted, what's silenced. In your life story, what parts have you been leaving out? Are you focusing only on your failures and ignoring your moments of resilience? Are you clinging to a fixed identity and forgetting how much you've already grown? Third, practice conscious reinterpretation. Pick a difficult episode from your life and try to tell the story in a new way. Instead of framing it as a defeat, what if you saw it as a turning point? Instead of viewing an experience as proof of your inability, what if it became a story of your resilience? Derrida teaches that meaning is never final, closed, or eternal. Meaning is something we build and can rebuild whenever we choose to reread our own journey with new eyes. And what's the real reward of this process? Freedom. Freedom to stop being a prisoner of old narratives. Freedom to try new paths. Freedom to create new versions of yourself that better reflect who you are today and who you want to become. So here's my invitation to you. Before you repeat the same old story, pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this narrative still serving me? Or is it time to rewrite the script of my own life? Because in the end, as Derrida showed us, we're not finished texts, we're rough drafts, always in the process of revision. If there's one thing that scares most of us, it's change. Change in routine, jobs, relationships, dreams. Even though we know deep down that nothing in life is permanent, we still cling to things. We want things to stay the way they are. We hope people won't change. We want our feelings to remain constant, and we crave some kind of guarantee that life will stay stable. But, as Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher who lived over 2,500 years ago, once said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, because neither the man nor the river are the same." This is probably one of the most famous lines in the history of philosophy. Heraclitus became known as the philosopher of becoming, the thinker who saw change as the very essence of reality. For him, the only constant in life is change. Everything flows. Everything transforms. Everything is in motion. That stability we all chase, it's a comfortable illusion, but still an illusion. So what does this mean for your everyday life? It means that fighting against change is like trying to hold water in your hands. the harder you try, the more it slips through your fingers. The more you cling, the more you suffer. Heraclitus invites us to adopt an attitude of active acceptance. Accept life's flow, not with resignation, but with wisdom. He writes, "Everything flows. Nothing stays the same." At first glance, that might sound depressing, but actually, it's incredibly freeing. Because if everything changes, then no pain lasts forever. No tough phase will go on indefinitely. No failure defines who you are, because you're always becoming something new. Think about it for a second. Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? Your ideas, your emotions, your priority, are they the same? Probably not. And that's a good thing. Change is what allows growth. It's what allows learning. It's what makes renewal possible. Heraclitus saw the world as a constant dance of opposites. Day and night, hot and cold, life and death. Everything makes sense because its opposite exists. And it's in the tension between these opposites that life keeps moving. He said, "The way up and the way down are one and the same," meaning the highs and lows of life are all part of the same cycle. Success and failure, joy and sadness, hope and fear, they're all part of the dynamic of existence. When you really get this, you start to change the way you look at difficult moments. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this phase trying to teach me?" Instead of fighting against life's tides, you learn to navigate them more smoothly. Embracing the flow doesn't mean being passive, quite the opposite. It means understanding that your real strength isn't in controlling what you can't, but in adapting, reinventing, and responding consciously to each new phase. Heraclitus also reminds us that identity is not fixed. You don't have some unchanging essence. You are always being built. Every choice, every experience, every encounter shapes you. If today you feel far from the person you want to become, know that this is also part of the process, because the person you'll be tomorrow is already being shaped by the decisions you're making now. The Greek philosopher reminds us, a man's character is his destiny. In other words, your attitude toward change defines the direction of your life. So how do you apply Heraclitus's philosophy in daily life? First, practice healthy letting go. Recognize when a phase of life has ended, be it a relationship, a job, a friendship, or even an outdated version of yourself. Second, develop emotional flexibility. When the unexpected happens, instead of reacting with anger or frustration, pause and ask yourself, how can I adapt to this in a creative way? Third, adopt a mindset of constant learning. Every change carries a lesson. Even moments of loss or failure have something to teach you. And maybe the most important lesson, stop waiting for life to go back to how it was. It won't. And that's okay. Life isn't a straight line. It's a river with bends, falls, calm stretches, rapids, and you're in the middle of that flow, navigating, learning, growing. So if today you're going through a time of instability, transformation, uncertainty, remember Heraclitus. Remember that the very nature of life is movement, and that it's precisely because of impermanence that things renew, pain fades, and new possibilities always appear. So I'll leave you with 2 questions. What are you trying to control that you should have let flow a long time ago? And what change have you been putting off just because you're afraid to let go of something that no longer makes sense? How many times in your life have you felt completely drained by negative emotions? Sadness, envy, fear, anger. These feelings, when left unchecked, can drain your energy, limit your actions, and make you feel stuck in a never-ending cycle. That's exactly what 17th century Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza addresses with one of the most transformative ideas in philosophy: the ethics of joy and the expansion of our capacity to live. Spinoza believed that the ultimate goal of human life is to increase our power to exist. But what did he mean by that? First, you need to understand what he called affections, or affects. For Spinoza, we are constantly being affected by everything around us, by people, events, and the ideas we encounter. These affections come in 2 main types: sad passions and joyful affects. Sad passions are the emotions that lower our ability to act. They leave us feeling stuck, confused, powerless, and small in the face of life. Joyful effects, on the other hand, increase our power. They boost our capacity to live more fully, with more awareness, and with inner freedom. For Spinoza, joy isn't just a fleeting emotion. It's a state of existential growth. It's when you feel yourself expanding, mentally, physically, and spiritually, moving towards more life. He writes, "Joy is the transition from a lesser state of existence to a greater one." In other words, being joyful, in Spinoza's sense, is about living in a state of growth, openness to the world, and building meaningful connections. So how do you reach that state in the middle of daily challenges? The first step, according to Spinoza, is to recognize and understand the sad passions that dominate us. It's not about denying or repressing these feelings. It's about going through a deep process of self-knowledge, looking directly at what's affecting you, understanding the causes, and gaining freedom from those emotional states. For example, if you're constantly feeling angry, instead of reacting impulsively or blaming yourself, ask, where is this anger coming from? What circumstances or thoughts are triggering these negative feelings? Spinoza believed that knowledge is the path to freedom. He said, "There is no hope without fear, and no fear without hope." Meaning, many of our negative emotions come from distorted views of reality. The clearer we are about how our emotions drive us, the more power we gain to make better choices. Another core point in Spinoza's philosophy is the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. For him, human relationships have a direct impact on our capacity to live. Being around people who inspire you, who support you, who bring positive energy, is essential to cultivating joy. On the flip side, relationships built on envy, competition, jealousy, or manipulation only feed sad passions and lower your vitality. So here's a practical question. Are the people around me increasing or decreasing my capacity to live? And it's not just people. It's also the ideas you consume, the content you watch, the environments you spend time in. Spinoza invites us to make conscious choices about what we allow to affect us. He understood that we are interconnected beings, and that everything around us has the power to shape us, for better or worse. Another fundamental concept in his ethics is that freedom is not the absence of determination, but understanding the causes. In simple terms, true freedom isn't about doing whatever pops into your head. It's about acting with awareness, understanding your motives, your emotions, and the consequences of your actions. So, how can you build this kind of freedom in your daily life? Here are 3 practices inspired by Spinoza's philosophy. 1. Emotional self-awareness. Take moments to identify what emotions are dominating your thoughts and actions. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? 2. Cultivate positive affects. Seek out activities, people, and environments that bring you joy, learning, and personal growth. Limit your exposure to constant negativity. 3. Transform sad passions. When you notice yourself stuck in a negative emotional state, try to step back and view the situation with more reason. Reflect on how you can turn that emotional state into a learning moment and positive action. Spinoza reminds us that life is a constant flow of effects, and if we're not paying attention, we can spend years being driven by sad passions without even realizing it. But here's the good news. We always have the choice to take a different path. Spinoza's ethics of joy isn't about naive optimism. It's about personal power, awareness, and real transformation. It's a call for you to take control of your emotional life, to seek what expands you, and step away from what holds you back. So ask yourself today, what choices can I make to increase my capacity to live? In a world that's increasingly focused on the self, on chasing personal interests, asserting individual identity, and fulfilling private desires, the philosophy of Emmanuel Levinas stands out as a powerful and urgent invitation. Take responsibility for the other. Levinas, a 20th century Lithuanian French philosopher, lived through the horrors of World War II. He was a prisoner of war, lost much of his family during the Holocaust, and yet, even after all that pain, his philosophy is not one of hatred. It's a philosophy of ethical responsibility. For Levinas, the most profound transformation a human being can experience doesn't happen during moments of personal glory. It happens in the real encounter with the face of the other. So, what does that mean? For Levinas, the face of the other isn't just someone's physical appearance. It's a powerful ethical symbol. It's the recognition of another person's vulnerability, fragility, and shared humanity. When we come face to face with someone else, their pain, their story, their fears, something awakens in us. We're called to act, to care, to respond. He writes, "The face of the other orders me, thou shalt not kill." At first glance, this might sound simple, but it carries enormous ethical weight. Before any rational decision, before any reflection, the presence of the other already creates a responsibility in us. It's as if the other person silently forces us to recognize their life matters, their suffering concerns me, their existence calls me to action. And here comes one of Levinas's biggest philosophical shifts. Ethics begins before thought. It starts with the concrete experience of encounter. In that moment when someone looks at you with need, when someone's pain moves you, when you realize that your action or inaction could change someone's life. This perspective breaks with many traditional ideas in Western ethics that often start with reason, logic, or mutual interest. Levinas says the opposite. Before I think, I am already responsible. And this responsibility, he says, is unconditional. It doesn't depend on whether we like the person, or whether they're close to us, or whether they deserve it. It doesn't matter if they love us or hate us, if they're friend or stranger, fair or unfair. The simple fact that the other exists already places us in a position of responsibility. Does that sound overwhelming? Maybe. But it's also incredibly freeing. Because when we embrace this responsibility, we start a process of ethical transformation within ourselves. Levinas invites us to break free from narcissistic living, to step outside the cycle of self-centeredness, to realize that the meaning of life isn't just in what we achieve, it's also in what we give, in how we care for others, in how we respond to the suffering around us. Here's a practical reflection. How many times in the past few days have you truly noticed the other? How many times have you really listened to someone with attention and empathy? How many times have you offered help, even when no one asked? Levinas reminds us, the world is full of faces calling out to us, faces asking for compassion, faces asking for our humanity. And the interesting thing is, by caring for others, we end up transforming ourselves. For Levinas, ethics isn't a burden we carry. It's a path toward personal growth. With every small act of care, of listening, of solidarity, we become more human, more aware, more ethical. He writes, "To be human is to be responsible. Responsible for who? For the other, for their pain, for their dignity. Now, this doesn't mean we should erase ourselves or live only for others, but it does mean recognizing that living in society means our actions have real impact on the people around us. If we choose indifference, we're, in a way, denying our own humanity. If we choose responsibility, we're affirming our ethical capacity to make the world better. So, how do you put this philosophy into practice? Here are 3 steps inspired by Levinas that you can start today. 1. Practice true listening. Before giving automatic responses, pause. Really listen to the other person with genuine attention. Notice not just the words, but the feelings behind them. 2. Recognize the other's right to exist. Don't reduce anyone to labels, judgments, or stereotypes. Every person carries a unique story, a personal struggle, a human journey. 3. Act with concrete responsibility. Whether at work, at home, or on the street, look for opportunities to act with empathy. Sometimes a small gesture makes a huge difference. A word of support, an act of kindness, a compassionate glance. Levinas teaches us that ethics doesn't just happen in big philosophical debates. It happens in everyday life, in the simplest interactions, in unexpected encounters. To live ethically, for him, means to accept that the other always comes before the self. It means understanding that we're not isolated islands, but part of a network of care and shared responsibility. And as challenging as that might be, it's one of the most powerful paths to personal growth. So here's the final reflection. What responsibility have you been avoiding that you could start embracing today? In times of disillusionment, political crisis, extreme individualism, and a kind of collective exhaustion, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that our individual actions don't make a difference. But it's exactly in these moments that the philosophy of Hannah Arendt, one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century, becomes urgent and necessary. She reminds us that every action has the power to create something new in the world, to open up possibilities, to spark a kind of rebirth. Arendt, a German Jewish philosopher, lived through one of the darkest periods in history: Nazism, World War II, and the Holocaust. She experienced exile, persecution, and the pain of watching the world descend into violence and destruction. And yet, her philosophy is not one of despair. On the contrary, it's a philosophy of action, hope, and creation. In her most famous work, The Human Condition, Arendt offers a powerful reflection on what it means to act in the world. For her, being human means being born. And with every new birth comes the capacity to start something new. She called this concept natality, and it's at the heart of her philosophy. For Arendt, natality isn't just about biological birth. It's about our ongoing ability to initiate, to act, to break free from the automatic repetition of the past. Every time we choose to act consciously and ethically, we're, in a sense, creating a new beginning. So, what does it mean to act? For Arendt, action is much more than just completing tasks. Acting means stepping into the world in a public, conscious, and responsible way. It means putting your unique voice and presence into the shared space of existence. It means leaving a mark, no matter how small, on the world we all share. She wrote, "The meaning of politics is freedom, and the field of experience for freedom is action." In other words, every time you choose to act, whether it's standing up for a cause, speaking out against injustice, starting a project that helps others, or even having a tough but necessary conversation, you're exercising the transformative power of action. But here's the challenge. According to Arendt, we live in a society that often values only productivity and consumption, and forgets the importance of political action in the broader sense. Action that serves the common good, builds dialogue, and creates real change. She also warns us about the danger of what she called the banality of evil, a concept she developed while covering the trial of Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Nazi final solution. What shocked Arendt wasn't Eichmann's monstrous nature. It was his mediocrity, his ability to commit horrific acts simply by following orders, without thinking, without questioning. And this brings us to one of her most powerful lessons. Omission is also a form of action. When we choose to do nothing, we're, in a way, helping maintain the status quo. We're silently saying yes to the way the world is, even when it hurts us. That's why Arendt urges us to take responsibility and become agents of change, even if your actions seem small, even if the impact seems minimal. What matters is not giving up on acting. She writes, "Action, for Arendt, is the power to interrupt the inevitable course of events." So, how does this apply to your daily life? First, recognize that every choice you make is a form of action. The way you treat people around you, how you handle the injustices you witness, whether or not you participate in important conversations in your community. Second, reclaim the power of dialogue. Arendt believed that action gains meaning in public spaces. in encounters with others, in the exchange of ideas. If you stay silent out of fear, laziness, or indifference, you're missing the chance to help shape the world. Third, remember natality. No matter how discouraging things might look, there's always the possibility of a new beginning. History isn't written in stone, and you are part of it. If you feel stuck in a cycle of inaction, if life has started to feel meaningless, maybe it's time to follow Arendt's advice. Interrupt the automatic course of your own existence with a conscious act. It doesn't have to be something big. It could be a sincere conversation, a courageous decision, a community project, a stand for justice, or even the choice to finally make personal changes you've been putting off. The world needs your action, not perfect action, but human, real, and committed action. Arendt reminds us that politics, in its most beautiful and broadest sense, begins with small choices, in how we treat each other, in how we respond to collective challenges, in our willingness to stop being mere spectators, and start being active participants in history. So here's the final question. What small act of courage can you take today to help spark the rebirth of a new possibility in the world? How many times have you felt like you're just going through the motions, waking up, completing tasks, having surface-level conversations, without really being present? How often have your decisions been made not based on what you truly wanted, but out of fear of disappointing others, social pressure, or simply habit? If you've ever found yourself living on autopilot, the philosopher Martin Heidegger has a tough but essential question for you. Are you living authentically, or just drifting along with the inertia of they? Heidegger, one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, spent much of his work exploring what it truly means to be human at the deepest level. And one of the most provocative conclusions of his philosophy is this: most people live inauthentically without even realizing it. In his major work, Being and Time, Heidegger introduces the concept of the they, or das Man in German, a term that refers to the impersonal, socially conditioned way of living. But what does living in the mode of they really mean? It's when you act because that's just how things are done. When you choose a career because it seems safe. When you adopt opinions without questioning them, because that's what everyone thinks. When you define success, happiness, or love based on external standards. Living in the mode of they means giving up your individuality. It's becoming just another face in the crowd, repeating behaviors, ideas, and lifestyles that don't necessarily reflect who you really are. Heidegger warns us, this impersonal way of living might bring comfort, but it also creates a sense of emptiness, a subtle feeling that you're drifting away from yourself, that something important is being left behind. So, what wakes us up from this state of inertia? According to Heidegger, it often happens when we become aware of our own mortality, that moment when you deeply realize that life is finite, that one day you will die, and that the time you have is limited. He calls this awakening existential anxiety. But unlike what many people think, this anxiety isn't just a negative feeling. For Heidegger, it's a crucial wake-up call. It pulls us out of distraction and forces us to face our existence with more seriousness. It's that moment when you suddenly realize, time is passing, and I'm not living in alignment with who I really am. And here comes Heidegger's central invitation, to live authentically. But what does authenticity really mean for him? It's not about just doing whatever you feel like, acting on impulse, or adopting a fake sense of rebellion. Being authentic, for Heidegger, means taking full responsibility for your own existence. It's looking at your finiteness and choosing to live consciously, making decisions aligned with your deepest values. It's asking yourself every day, is this life I'm living really the life I've chosen? Or is it just the life I've been passively following? Being authentic means having the courage to make hard decisions, to go against the grain, to give up certain comforts, in order to live according to what truly matters to you. Heidegger reminds us that authenticity takes work. It takes reflection. It takes presence. He writes, "Man is a being that projects, a being that throws itself ahead toward its possibilities." In other words, we're always in the process of becoming. Our existence isn't something fixed. It's an open project, something we shape through the choices we make. So, how can you apply this to your everyday life? First, develop the ability to listen to yourself. Make time for silence. Ask yourself honestly, what really matters to me? What projects truly excite me? What kind of person do I want to become? Second, start recognizing moments when you're acting on autopilot. Notice when you say yes just to please others, when you choose a path out of fear of judgment, or when you repeat behaviors that no longer serve you. Third, embrace your finiteness. Instead of running away from the idea of death, use that awareness as motivation to live with more intensity and truth. Heidegger reminds us that death isn't just a future event. It's a condition that shapes every moment of our existence. Every day is an opportunity to live more authentically, to choose more consciously, to love with more presence, to work with more purpose, to say no to what doesn't represent you, and yes to what brings you closer to your true self. And finally, remember, authenticity isn't a final destination. It's a continuous process. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, days when you fall back into the inertia of they. But what matters is your willingness to start again, to return to yourself, to choose once more, to live more truthfully. So here's a final question. If today were the last day of your life, would you be living authentically or just following a script that was handed to you? How many times have you felt trapped by a fixed idea of who you are? How often have you told yourself things like, "That's just how I am," "I was born this way," or "This is my personality, I can't change"? If you've ever thought like this, you're probably living inside a rigid narrative about yourself, a single static story, as if you were a finished product. But the French philosopher Gilles Deleuze has something to say about that, something that can completely change the way you see yourself. You are not a fixed being. You are a process. You are a becoming. Deleuze, along with Félix Guattari, developed a radically different philosophy of identity. For them, human beings are not unchangeable essences. We are not a final set of characteristics. Quite the opposite. We are a constant flow of transformation, emotions, experiences, and possibilities. And what does that mean in real life? It means the real question isn't just, who am I? But, who am I becoming right now? And who could I become tomorrow? Deleuze invites us to let go of the idea of having a fixed identity, and instead, embrace life as a continuous process of change and difference. He calls this becoming. For Deleuze, to live fully is to always be in the middle of a transformation. It's allowing yourself to be affected by new experiences, new ideas, new people. It's understanding that life is an open field of possibilities, and that every choice, every encounter, every experience can lead you to become something different from who you were yesterday. He writes, "There is no identity. There are only becomings." That doesn't mean you should lose yourself or live without direction. But it does mean that your essence isn't some factory-set blueprint. It's something that's built, experimented with, and constantly reinvented. Take a moment to think. How many times have you limited yourself by thinking you're too shy, too insecure, or just not creative enough? How many opportunities have you missed because you clung to an outdated self-image? Deleuze challenges us to break free from these internal traps. He talks about becoming other, the process of stepping outside of yourself, exploring new ways of existing, allowing yourself to be affected in unexpected ways. But here's the key. This becoming other is not about copying others. It's not about changing just to fit in or to please people. On the contrary, it's a movement that comes from within, from a radical openness to the new, from a genuine willingness to experiment with life in all its multiplicity. Deleuze also reminds us, life is not linear. It's not some predictable sequence of steps. It's full of ruptures, leaps, accidents, and unexpected encounters. He uses the metaphor of a rhizome to explain this. Unlike a tree, which grows upward with a single trunk and deep roots, a rhizome spreads in all directions, with no fixed center, no single starting point, always expanding. Your identity, according to Deleuze, is like a rhizome. It can branch out in countless ways. It can take new forms. It can create unexpected connections. So, how do you live this out in practice? First, make room for the new. That means saying yes to experiences you may have never considered. Meet different people, explore unfamiliar ideas, challenge your own certainties. Second, have the courage to break old patterns. If you catch yourself saying things like, "This is just how I am," maybe it's time to ask, is that really true, or is it just my fear of change talking? Third, embrace experimentation. Try new projects, new ways of expressing yourself, new ways of thinking. For Deleuze, life is an existential laboratory. Every experience is a chance to become something new. And one more thing, learn to live with discomfort. Transformation isn't always easy. It brings doubts, insecurities, moments of confusion. But it's exactly during those times that the most growth happens. Deleuze also invites us to rethink how we see difference. For him, difference is not something to fear or fix, but something to celebrate. We are all multiple beings. Inside us are many voices, desires, and potentials. Recognizing and embracing that multiplicity is a key step toward a more authentic and creative life. So, instead of chasing some final, perfect identity, why not start asking yourself, what other versions of myself am I still waiting to discover? This shift in perspective can free you from a lot of internal limitations. If you woke up tomorrow with total freedom to reinvent yourself, what would you do differently? For Deleuze, life is an open-ended process, a field of possibilities, and every day you have the chance to create new escape routes, to explore new existential territories, to become someone else. In moments of deep pain, unexpected loss, or existential crisis, it's common for a question to echo inside us. Why keep going? What's the point of all this? It was in the middle of some of the most extreme human suffering that Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist and philosopher, developed one of the most powerful approaches in existential psychology, logotherapy. Frankl didn't write about suffering from a safe, theoretical distance. He lived it firsthand. He survived the horrors of Nazi concentration camps during World War II. He lost his family. He endured hunger, cold, humiliation, and the constant threat of death. And even in that environment of absolute dehumanization, he discovered an essential truth about being human. Everything can be taken from a person except one thing: the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That's the heart of logotherapy, the search for meaning in life as a force strong enough to sustain us, even in the darkest times. For Frankl, the big question isn't, what do I expect from life? But instead, what does life expect from me? This shift in perspective is revolutionary. It pulls us out of the role of passive victims of circumstance and places us back as active agents, capable of finding meaning even in the middle of chaos. Frankl observed in the camps that people who had a reason to keep going, whether it was a child waiting for them, an unfinished project, or a dream yet to be realized, had a greater ability to withstand suffering. They didn't survive because life was easy. They survived because they had a why. He wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." That phrase became a core pillar of logotherapy. It reminds us that suffering, no matter how intense, doesn't have to be meaningless. It can become a source of inner transformation. But how do you find meaning in the middle of pain? Frankl teaches that life offers meaning in three main ways. 1. Through creating or accomplishing something. This could mean writing a book, helping someone, starting a project, or even just doing your current job with purpose. 2. Through experiencing love or deep connection. For Frankl, love is an unparalleled source of meaning. Loving someone, or even loving a cause, can give new direction to our lives. 3. Through the attitude we choose when facing unavoidable suffering. This may be the hardest, but also the most powerful way to find meaning. When we can't change the situation, we can still choose how we respond to it. Frankl called this the last of human freedoms. The freedom to choose our attitude, even when everything else has been stripped away. This teaching is deeply liberating. It reminds us that even when we lose control over external circumstances, we don't have to lose control over who we are on the inside. If you're facing a period of pain, grief, frustration, or crisis right now, maybe the first step is to ask yourself the question Frankl left us. What meaning can I find in this experience? What can I learn from this? What kind of person can I become through this pain? Logotherapy doesn't deny suffering. It acknowledges it, but also reframes it. It invites us to see life not as a problem to solve, but as a mission to fulfill. Frankl also warned about the danger of existential emptiness. He said many people don't just suffer from circumstances, but from losing their sense of meaning altogether. That kind of emptiness breeds boredom, anxiety, apathy, and often leads to self-destructive behaviors. That's why finding a clear purpose, a why, isn't just a nice idea. It's an existential need. But here's something important. Meaning in life is not some universal, one-size-fits-all answer. It's personal, unique to each individual, and it can change over time. The meaning that drove you in your 20s might not be the same at 40. What motivates you today may evolve tomorrow. Life is always shifting, and so is our meaning. That's why Frankl invites us into an ongoing, active search, a constant dialogue with ourselves, a daily practice of asking, what is life asking of me today? So, how can you start this search for meaning? Here are a few practical steps inspired by logotherapy. 1. Reflect on your past struggles. Ask yourself, what lessons have I learned from my hardest moments? Often, our deepest wounds hold the seeds of our greatest strengths. 2. Find something or someone that inspires you. A project, a person, a cause. Something that gives you a reason to get out of bed with purpose. 3. Shift your attitude towards small daily frustrations. Instead of complaining, ask, how can I respond to this in a more constructive way? 4. Clarify your values. The more aligned you are with what you truly believe in, the more meaning you'll find in your actions. Frankl left us a powerful legacy, the certainty that life can have meaning, even in the most extreme situations. He is living proof that even in the middle of pain, it's possible to find a reason to keep going. So now, I'll leave you with one final question. If life is asking you something today, what will your answer be? Before we wrap up, I just want to sincerely thank you for sticking with me through this entire philosophical journey. If even one of these 20 ideas stirred something in you, if any of these thoughts planted a seed of reflection, or sparked that good kind of discomfort that makes us rethink life, then it was already worth it. Philosophy isn't just theory, it's practice, it's transformation. It's a daily invitation to look within, question the world around us, and choose to live more consciously, more ethically, and more authentically. If you enjoyed this content, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, because there's a lot more like this coming, always with the goal of helping you think deeper, feel more, and live better. hit the like button because that helps YouTube know this video matters and it helps spread this message to more people. Drop a comment down below. Tell me which of these 20 lessons hit you the hardest, which one sparked an internal shift, or which philosopher you'd like me to cover in a future video. And of course, share this video with someone you feel might need a little inspiration to rethink their own life. Sometimes a simple message like this can make a big difference in someone's day. Stick around, there are already other videos on the channel waiting for you, with more ideas, more thought-provoking content, and more reflections for anyone who wants to live with greater meaning. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you in the next video.